Hello, and welcome to another video cast of Restoring the Right Hand. Today, we're going to talk about a response that was made in Review and Herald on January 26th concerning a Conrad Vine sermon on a message to the SDA nobility. And we were looking at the response, and we just want to challenge some things in there. I know that they were bothered by some of the things he said, but we were also bothered by some of the things they said. Hi, I'm Dr. Tim Piernick. I'm a chiropractor in the state of Florida who loves theology and history, and of course natural medicine. I hope you will find that you will enjoy what we talk about here today. Let's take a look at the presentation. Here we are. Just so you know, you can follow us on YouTube. You can subscribe to our channel. We'll be posting this video here. We don't always post everything on YouTube. We do post everything on our Rumble channel. And we just added a whole new series. My friend and co-author, Michael Farris, doctor of clinical nutrition, added a 3-part series on vaccination conscience and a matter of religious liberty. He asks a question about it, and he does a fantastic job answering. So I hope you'll go over there and check that out as well. Please also subscribe to that channel, and you can follow us also on our website and sign up for the newsletter. All right, so now we're into the topic. This is the January 26th response to Conrad Vine's sermon on to the SDA nobility, and he made a number of statements in there to which some of the people in the conference took exception to. And so we're going to just go a little bit by it, and we're going to start here, with their sort of preface, and we'll read through it. And it says, an informal release through the communication department of the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. The question whether an individual should take the COVID-19 vaccine or not has generated significant controversy within the Seventh-day Adventist Church. In light of Christ's prayer that they may all be one, this situation is tragic. Churches have been divided, family members alienated, and friendships severed. The mission of the church has been hindered, and its evangelistic outreach to the world has been negatively affected. At times, inaccurate statements have fostered and furthered these divisions. Now, I just want to stop right here. I wonder if they're going to take responsibility for their decisions. Yes, there are clearly people who are unhinged on the don't want to get a vaccine side, but there's also people on the other side who are pushing this, who clearly have some very strong views and don't mind running roughshod over their fellow church members' consciences. And so I just wonder if they're going to take some responsibility for this and say, hey, maybe we shouldn't have made a statement. Maybe we shouldn't have said, hey, we're being neutral by putting our thumb on the scale, but I won't hold my breath. Recently, some have challenged the right of the General Conference Administrative Committee, or ADCOM, to speak on behalf of the church. These critical statements have the potential to undermine church authority, create confusion, and lead to fragmentation. In response to the questions from sincere Adventists worldwide, the General Conference leadership here provides answers to some of the issues recently raised. Now, I just want to say this. If you listen to the sermon on To the SDA Nobility by Dr. Conrad Vine, you can go find it on YouTube. There's a number of places where it's there. I probably has about 100,000 views by now, maybe even more. There's nothing divisive about what he said. Really, there isn't. He is very much a sincere member of the church, and not only sincere, but he talked about how he knew many of these people who make these decisions personally. He loves them, prays with them. He thinks they're fine men and women. I think his main concern was what was happening to the people who are outside of those meetings, who lose their jobs, whose jobs are not secured by tithe dollars and towing the status quo. His main concern was people who have to work for a living and feed their families, dealing with the world and the restrictions that are brought about them. And so he was asking some very good questions, and I think if you haven't heard it, you should do yourself a favor and listen to it. But anyways, we'll move on. It says, what is the Seventh-day Adventist Church position on the COVID-19 vaccine as it relates to individual conscience? Now, I just want you to notice this. I try to highlight some of the things here they talk about, that they really believe this is a personal matter. They tried to separate religious liberty and individual conscience. And the problem is that really isn't separated. Where do you draw the line? There isn't a surgical device sharp enough to make that line. And often one is informed by the other. Many people, their consciences are convicted and they give up drinking. Is that not a determination of religious conscience? Many people whose conscience are smitten give up smoking. Is that not a religious conscience? There are women who are convicted of the sin of terminating their child, and they stop and either give the child up for adoption or attempt to try to bring it into the world and take care of it. Is that just a conscience issue, or is that something related to their faith in God, their exercise of their religious beliefs? Again, I feel like we're trying to create a narrow carve out to say, well, this isn't a religious freedom issue. This is more or less a conscience issue. And I think this is backfiring because no one really sees it that way. And so they go on, reaffirming the Seventh-day Adventist Church response to COVID-19 is clear on the rights of everyone to make decisions based on their conscientious convictions guided by the Holy Spirit. The statement says, now, even there, right there, if it's guided by the Holy Spirit, wouldn't that be a religious decision? But apparently they don't believe so. The statement says, the Seventh-day Adventist Church respects each individual's freedom of choice to make responsible decisions regarding their own health. Since our bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit, and we are both by creation and redemption, we are Christ by both creation and redemption, we should personally seek God's will about COVID-19 vaccinations. The decision whether to take the vaccine or not is not a matter of salvation, nor is it related, as some suggest, to the mark of the beast. It is a matter of personal choice. Again, this personal choice coming back, it's a personal choice. It's not really, we firmly believe in matters of personal conviction. Notice, personal conviction, not, convicted by, again, they mention Holy Spirit, but this is a personal conviction that if you decide not to do, that's your own choice. It is not because you've been following the teachings of the church, because we clearly don't believe that. Now, I just want to back up here. And I just want to note something here, that I don't know anyone, and I've been in this movement for a while, I don't know anyone who really believes that whether or not you take the shot has something related to your salvation. I think everyone would agree that if you were compelled and you believe that this was against your faith in God, then yes, it's going to bother you, and you're going to feel as if you sinned against God. It's very clear that if you believe that the body is a temple of the Holy Spirit, you're going to have some problems with this, and you're going to feel that it's a sin. In the grand scope of things, is it like violating the Ten Commandments? No, but for some people, I can definitely see how this would bother them, and for other people who don't know any better, this isn't going to bother them, and I get it. The other one is that they always bring this up, that it's the mark of the beast. I did a whole entire series on this, and I'm not sure why they keep bringing this up. And I've said over and over, it's not the mark of the beast. No one I know who's credible has said that this is the mark of the beast, particularly who's a Seventh-day Adventist. But they keep bringing this up because they need to make sure that it seems like the people who are against or have a contrary opinion for what the church is saying are extremists, radicals, conspiracy theorists. And it just simply isn't the case. He goes on, we firmly believe that in matters of personal conviction, we must be guided by the word of God, our conscience, and informed judgment. In weighing the various options, we should also take into considerations the benefits of vaccination extending beyond oneself and help to protect the local and global community at large. After personally researching all sides of the question, considering one's own unique health situation, seeking medical counsel, and praying, individuals should then, in consultation with their medical advisor doctor, to make the best personal choice possible. The Seventh-day Adventist Church respects the right of each member to make the best possible decision for their health in light of their personal convictions, health challenges, and medical counsel. Now, I just want to back up again. This is a personal choice, they're saying. Another personal choice. Yeah, it may be informed by the Bible. Yeah, I mean, you might be convicted to do this or that, but this is a personal choice. And one of my favorite parts is they said this, that after thinking about everything, you should think about the benefits of vaccination extending beyond oneself to help protect the local and global community at large. Now, this would be great if the current product actually stopped the spread, but it doesn't. And it's been shown over and over again that sometimes people who have 3 doses of this product are still able to spread the disease. So what good would that be? But why don't they ask, why don't they say, hey, in considering the benefits, also consider some of the drawbacks that could happen to you. Ask yourself if your child's really at risk for contracting this and getting sick, and know that some studies have shown that the product is actually dangerous to some children. But they don't say that, because this is, again, affirming the decision that the church and the medical leadership have made that we're going to support this medical product. We go on to their point 2 here. It says, will the Seventh-day Adventist Church support the rights of conscience for those who choose not to take a COVID-19 vaccination? We recognize that some of our members have serious concerns regarding COVID-19 vaccines and are willing to lose their job, if necessary, rather than take the vaccine. Although the Seventh-day Adventist Church sees this as a public health issue. This is their stance. It's not an issue of conscience, religious freedom. Religious freedom. It's not an issue of religious freedom. It is a public health issue. It's amazing how that is, because isn't indoor smoking a public health issue? And yet we teach as a body of believers that smoking is not only bad, but it's a sin against your body. Do we believe that drinking and driving and public drunkenness are a public health issue? Yes, we do. We believe that that's bad. As a matter of fact, the church used to support temperance policies to restrict or to stop completely the sale of alcohol. That's what we used to do. And many people who join the church have surrendered their habit of drinking and consuming alcoholic beverages. That's what they've done, based on what the teachings of the church is, particularly in regards to health, because we believe that the Bible teaches temperance from alcohol. That's what we believe. That's one of our pillars of our health message. So to say that this is merely public health, right, while it's true, but to say that public health is somehow separated from religious freedom, I don't know about that. I mean, I'm sure we have some people who believe all kinds of things about the planet and believe that eating a diet without meat saves the planet. Now, there's no real evidence behind that, but people believe that. And some people might even think that's a public health issue too. What we do believe is that obesity is bad. And we believe that eating a certain way, destroying the temple which God gives you in your body, is not a way to honor God and leads to sin. We know what Paul says about the Cretans, that their God is their belly, right? We know that appetite can be quite destructive. Is obesity a public health issue? It certainly is. And as a body of believers, we've taught temperance. Temperance doesn't just mean staying away from that which is good, but also not indulging in that which is okay or good for you. Again, drawing a line where there doesn't need to be one. We respect their conscientious convictions and can support them in the following ways: praying with them that God will work out a solution to the challenge they face, assisting them in writing a personal letter to their employer. Now, what's impressive about this is that Dr. Vine in his sermon showed how people have been fired because they said that I'm a Seventh-day Adventist and I am not going to take this medical procedure based on my faith. And then the employer has sought to pull up the actual position, the official position, which was ratified and published in 2015. And they said, this looks pretty pro-vaccine to me, and these people have been fired. That isn't supporting them. You still have that statement up on an issue that is clearly dividing the church. Why do we have this statement up? Well, there's a number of reasons, but I'm not going to get into it just right here. But notice this, that they're going to pray with you. This is almost like it says in James, if a man comes to you hungered and tired, and you say, go ye be ye filled with the Holy Ghost, but give them nothing to eat, what good have you done for them? So simply praying for them and say, go ye be ye filled with the Holy Ghost, and here's it, we're going to help you write a letter that says, I don't want this, but we're not going to support you. What good have you done? I hope that it has worked for some people. I pray that it has. Anyways, they go on in the 2021 reaffirmation. And again, not only did they publish their original statement in 2015, but they had to reaffirm it in 2021. And now they're answering it again, tripling down on it, if you will. We recognize that at times our members will have personal concerns or even conscientious convictions that go beyond the teachings and positions of the church. Notice, they're saying we're not really taking a position, but they are taking a position. And the position of the church is that vaccines save lives and they are in harmony with the health message. In their 2015 statement, they argue is essentially that through biblical revelation, the spirit of prophecy, and peer-reviewed literature that our health message has come about, and this health message supports vaccinations and encourages, and thereby they encourage our members to responsibly participate in vaccination, even mandatory vaccination. This is their position, whether you like it or not. That's their position. You can go read the 2015 statement. So that's the doubling down. This is the tripling down of it. And here's the thing, saying that isn't entirely accurate, because this hasn't always been the position of the church. It clearly wasn't the official position of church until 2015. Anyways, let me go on. In these cases, the church's religious liberty leaders will do what they can to provide support and counsel on a personal, not a church basis, even at times assisting members in writing their own personal accommodation requests to employers and others. This is basically saying you're on your own, which is what they said in 2015. You're on your own. But it's clear that if you take a position that you don't want this because you think there's unclean things in it, because you disagree with the usage or putting into the body of aborted fetal cell tissues, you feel that it's dangerous to your health, that it can affect your heart, that you're not in a risk category for it, or that you would rather protect yourself using the things that you've read in the spirit of prophecy, this is beyond the teachings and position of the church. But it wasn't always so, and we'll deal with that. But I want you to see this. And from the very beginning, I just want you to understand this, that vaccination, even back in the days of smallpox, was a religious freedom issue. My friend and co-author, he did a 3-part series on this. And in the very beginning, he shows that the first objections to vaccination were based on religious freedom. It is interesting that in 1899, one of the Great Britain passed what they called the conscience clause, and people who decided not to take a vaccine were called conscientious objectors. And in passing that clause, they did not want to look into the specific beliefs of individuals because the mainline churches did not support them. But if you simply had a belief, whether it be informed by your faith or philosophy, you didn't have to get it. And that was the very first exemption that we know of. In 1899, the British Parliament passed it because they felt that compulsory vaccination was wrong. And this was after a long study that they did where they looked at the benefits of vaccination, the dangers of it. The Parliament concluded that there were benefits from it, but they also concluded that there were dangers, and not everyone's benefit and dangers or risks were the same. And so therefore, if people didn't want to get it, they didn't have to have it. And what was amazing is that people thought that after 1899, that Great Britain would become a smallpox colony and everyone would die, but they didn't. And even though the vaccination rates around the entire country plummeted to about 50%, the rates of smallpox deaths actually continue to decrease, which leads people to believe that the reduction in smallpox had little to do with compulsory vaccination, but more to do with improved nutrition, improved sanitation, improved hygiene, and cleaning up the cities. But here's the point I want to drive home here. If it's not a religious issue, if it has nothing to do with religion, then why would the Biden administration make a list of religious vaccine objectors? Why would they do this? Why would they go through this? Listen to this article here. This was published January 11th this year. And it says, as a tiny administrative agency in the District of Columbia announced a new policy today that will likely serve as a model for a whole government push to assemble the list of Americans who object on religious grounds to a COVID-19 vaccine. This is what they're saying. The Pretrial Services Agency for the District of Columbia, a federal independent entity that assists officers in the District of Columbia courts formulating release recommendations and providing supervision and services to defendants awaiting trial, announced a new record system that will store the names and personal religious information of all employees who make religious accommodation requests for religious exemptions from the federally mandated vaccination requirement. Now, whether you want the procedure or not, whether you want it or not, right? You should, as someone who believes in prophecy and someone who studies history and maybe someone who picked up the Great Controversy once, your hair should stand on the back of your neck that they would make this list. And as a matter of fact, even if you thought that everyone should have the shot, right? You say, oh, everyone needs to have this. Even if that's what you just believe, you should be concerned. But again, the issue for us is that we have decided that this type of thinking is beyond our teachings. And yet, here it is. They want to collect and store the data on people who don't want to take their mandated procedure. Again, if it's not a religious issue, if it has nothing to do with it, why in the world is the government then collating this as if it is and storing this information to be used at some time for Lord knows what? I'm sure that if you've been reading Revelation, you might have an idea. Again, if this isn't a religious freedom issue, why is it that the people who promote it are using Jesus to promote the vaccine? This is a very clear example of trying to combine the two messages, but it even gets more in your face. This is Governor Kathy Hochul, and she is the governor of New York. And listen to what she says. This was a homily that she gave in a Brooklyn Christian Center, September 2021. And she says, we are not through this pandemic. I wished we were, but I prayed a lot to God during this time. And you know what? God did answer our prayers. He made the smartest men, women, the scientists, the doctors, the researchers. He made them come up with a vaccine. That is from God. And we must say, thank you, God. Thank you. And I wear my vaccinated necklace all the time to say, I'm vaccinated. All of you, yes, I know you're vaccinated. You're the smart ones. But you know, there's people out there who aren't listening to God and what God wants. Now, I just want to stop here. You know, it's interesting that if a number of I don't know, prominent conservative evangelicals had made a statement like this, I have a feeling that the religious liberty organs of the church would be up at arms and saying, how dare you appropriate that language? Maybe we'd get like a special red alert edition of Liberty magazine saying it's on the way. This is the Christian nationalism we've all been worried about. But when it comes to abortion promoting feminist governor of New York, right, liberal as the day is long, even progressive, right, when she's out here promoting this, telling you that this is God's will, crickets. Not one word. No, you know, well, we need to really think about religious liberty here. I mean, she's behind the mandates in her state, forcing people to do this because she believes it's God's will. And we're like, oh no, that's science. It's public health. Look at what she's saying. And you could say, well, maybe she really didn't mean it. And maybe she was just kind of saying that well, that's to presume too much. You don't know. All I know is that either this was written out, but this is what she gave. She made a public speech. And generally when politicians do it, particularly at her level, every single thing is vetted. Every speech is written. Everything is carefully thought about and given out. That's just the way it is. And so she's talking to church and she goes, listen, she goes on. You know who they are. I need you to be my apostles. Hochul told her audience, I need you to go out and talk about it and say, we owe this to each other. We love each other. Jesus taught us to love one another. And how do we show that love? But to care about each other enough to say, please get the vaccine because I love you and I want you to live. I want our kids to be safe when they're in schools. I want our children. I want to be safe when you go to a doctor's office and are treated by somebody. You want to get the virus from them. You are already sick. You're already sick or you wouldn't be there. This is amazing. Amazing what she says. And somehow it's public health, has nothing to do with religion. And yet we have these examples. And what about these guys? Well, we sit here and we're trying to talk about, religious freedom. We're trying to talk about it. But whatever happened to the fact that there are people around the world, including famously the trucker convoy in Canada, people around the world who are protesting against not only vaccine mandates, but vaccine passports. They're protesting about it. And no matter what you think about it, the groups here are both liberals and conservatives. Some of them are triple vaxxed and some of them are zero vaxxed. And they're all there protesting because they see that this whole thing has been a vehicle to take away freedoms and liberties, and they want it back. They want it back. That's why they're out there. I mean, it's freezing cold in Canada, literally freezing cold. And they're over there doing this. Why wouldn't this awaken the spirit of liberty in our leaders and say, hey, you know what? Maybe we called this one a little too premature, and maybe we need to think about this a little bit more in detail. Or what about the censorship that goes on? If you talk about certain things, if you mention certain things on YouTube and other platforms, you not only get demonetized, but your videos get taken down. Why is this never mentioned as part of it? If someone who believes in religious freedom should also believe deeply in freedom of speech. Our ability to evangelize and get out our message is entirely dependent on whether or not government recognizes the inalienable rights of human beings to have free speech. We're going to keep saying whatever we're going to say no matter what, but when government changes its laws, it just makes it harder for us to say it. Why hasn't this come up? Again, none of these considerations come up. It's, hey, it's a public health issue. We need to move on. And so they make this point. Dr. Vine in his sermon made a statement that he felt that the 2015 statement and the 2021 retestament of that statement, he felt that the AdCom was not the appropriate administrative vehicle to make that statement for the worldwide church. And of course, the church comes in and says, yes, we can. And they do. And this is their evidence. I'm not even going to read through all this. I honestly, I'm not concerned with this. I think that sometimes we want to lawyer our way out of it. And I'm not against the argument that Dr. Vine made. He knows more about it than I do, but I'm not worried about it. I like to look at it like this. Jesus, listen to what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 23, verses 1-3. Then spake Jesus to the multitude and his disciples, saying, the scribes and Pharisees sit in the seat of Moses. Notice that Jesus, even though these corrupt men were sitting in the Sanhedrin, they were the leaders, the very ones who wanted to put him to death, the very ones who wanted to put Lazarus to death because so many were being converted, the very ones who wanted to have illegal proceedings and try to have Jesus killed, the very ones who wanted to bribe Judas to betray Jesus, these very ones sat in the seat of Moses. And notice what Jesus, he doesn't deny their authority. He doesn't deny it. And he says, all therefore, whatever so they bid, you observe, and that observe and do, but do not ye after their works, for they say and do not. For they bind heavy burdens, grievous to be borne, and they lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not move them with one of their fingers. Now notice this. He doesn't deny their authority, but he says, don't live like them. These are the ones who say and they do not. Don't be corrupt like them. Jesus wasn't concerned about their authority. There was one of authority greater than them, and we know that when Peter and John are challenged, what do they say? If it seems right to you, should we obey God over men? Right? This idea that, hey, it's more important to obey God over men. And Jesus does not deny their authority. I don't deny their authority to say whatever they want to say. They can say it. You can fight about whether it's legal, whether it's this or that, but it doesn't matter. Our point is that we need to follow Jesus. And yes, we're members of this church, but the Bible's supposed to be the backbone of our structure. It's supposed to be the template. And if we can't go back to that and see what we're doing, we have issues. This is a wonderful picture of King Saul with Samuel, and he's reaching for him as Samuel's walking away. King Saul did not obey Samuel. He had made the sacrifice before Samuel had shown up. And when Samuel showed up, he says, why are all these sheep still bleeding? Why haven't you done what I've asked you? And so, sorry, the two, I'm mixing the two. He goes there, he sees that he's already made sacrifice, and he goes to walk away. And then when he goes to walk away, King Saul tears at his mantle and rips it. And of course, Samuel says that the authority will be taken from you. Now, I just want to point out here, all of King Saul's actions, whether it be sacrificing when Samuel told him not to, whether it be that he spared King Agag when he wasn't supposed to and took the best of the sheep and the gold and all those other things, or when he executed the priest, when he told his men to go after David, when he did all that, guess what? He had the authority to do it. He had the authority to do it. You can't argue that he didn't have the authority. He lawfully did that. There was nothing that he did that was unlawful according to his authority. Was it unlawful according to the eyes of God? Absolutely. Was it a complete rebellion against God and his 10 commandments? Absolutely. Was it an affront to the spirit of prophecy? Absolutely. Was he wrong? Absolutely. But even David would not kill him, would not even rebel against him. Why? Because he was still the Lord's anointed. And so when we look at our leaders of the church, these people in positions, they may indeed have the very authority that they say that they have. Why would I question it? They may indeed feel that their position is secure, that they've been anointed by God. I don't know them personally. Why would I question that? But what I can tell you is that if I compare the scriptures with what you do, and I see that they don't line up, there's a problem. There's a problem. And unless you can give me an it is written for why you're doing what you're doing, then there's a problem. And we need to address this problem. We need to study this problem, and we need to solve this problem. It isn't solved by saying that someone has authority or they don't have authority, because it doesn't matter. Even if you have authority, if you exercise that authority unlawfully according to the eyes of God, then you're going to be answerable to him, and it's not going to be a good day. And so at the end of the day, I'm not concerned with whether or not they believe they have the authority. If you've made a statement that is incorrect and is based on a false understanding, then this statement is still incorrect, even if you had the authority to make it. So here we go. Point number 5. Was the 2021 reaffirmation statement of the Seventh-day Adventist Church's position on immunization influenced by money from the government of the United States, including Medicare, Medicaid, payments to Adventist hospitals, loans and grants to Adventist institutions? Now, this is going to be two-part. We're going to look at part 5 and part 6. And I just want to point out that they talk about that, hey, they got this money for services rendered. In the sermon that Dr. Vine made, he talked about the amount of money that they get from the government. And I don't think that Dr. Vine was saying that we just get handouts from the government. We do get paid directly from Medicare and Medicaid to the hospitals, and the hospitals then pay money to our different schools or different institutions or conferences. That's how it works. That's generally how it works. But the point is that they're saying, hey, we're not just doing this because the government told us. But I just want to point something out here, all right? Because I know what they're saying, and I understand they got paid for services rendered. They're like, hey, we did this, the government paid us, right? I get that. But there's something that you have to understand, is that sometimes when you're answerable to someone for the money that they pay you, then they kind of control you, particularly when 60% of your budget at any given hospital is roughly 60% of your budget is roughly made up of Medicare, Medicaid payments. It's what it is. A lot of people don't have private insurance, so 60% of it is that. And so hospitals have to live and make payments and payroll based on that. So there is a connection there, even if those services are rendered, and you have to ask yourself, well, why are we so dependent and all those other things? But that's a topic for another time. This is a Supreme Court case, President Biden and the Secretary of Health and Human Services versus Louisiana. And this was the Attorney General of Louisiana. And they basically filed a stay of the Medicare Medicaid mandate to stop employees who are working at hospitals from being forcibly vaccinated or lose their job. And so the court took this case up, and the court basically decided whether or not the stay, the injunction against the mandate should be allowed to continue or it should be stopped. And the majority of the court ruled that the mandate for healthcare workers should go on. And you have to understand that this mandate for the healthcare workers wasn't the Secretary of Health and Human Services saying everyone who works at a hospital has to get the vaccine. That's not what they did. What they said was, if you want our payments, if you want that 60% of your budget or more, if you want that, you're going to have to show us that your employees, almost all of them are vaccinated, or a certain percentage of have a religious exemption. They didn't have that at first. They eventually amended that, and that was one of the things that the court considered. Because they amended that and said, yes, we'll allow certain religious exemptions. This was one of the things that the court did say, okay, well, since you allowed that. But essentially, the argument was that the Secretary of Health and Human Services has the right not to pay for something they don't want. And this would allow the mandate to continue, because the court felt that the government has the right to pay for services that they want. And so in their reasoning here, it says a facility's failure to comply may lead to monetary penalties, denial of payment for new admissions, and ultimately termination of participation in the program. So basically, the court ruled that the government can pull the financial rug out from all these hospitals, outpatient centers, and different facilities. That's what they said. They said that the Secretary of Health and Human Services has the authority to make that decision. And that's kind of their workaround with the vaccine mandate. That's how they did that. But I want you to notice this, all right? This is important. Because in looking at this, the court was reasoning, and this is part of their reasoning why they supported it. And in their oral arguments, which I listened to, they were asking questions about this. And notice what they said. They said this: all of this, perhaps why healthcare workers and public health organizations overwhelmingly support the Secretary's rule. That means everyone gets vaccinated. And it says, see also brief for the American Medical Association, their amicus brief, which is basically a number of reasons of why the court should decide to keep this American Public Health Association brief, of course, and then the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Indeed, their support suggests that vaccination requirement under these circumstances is a straightforward and predictable example of the health safety regulations that Congress has authorized the Secretary to impose. So the American Medical Association is not a government organization. It is a group of physicians, and they are quite powerful. And they, along with others, all said, this is a great exercise of government authority to force people to get vaccinated in a roundabout way. And the roundabout way is, if you don't get a number of people vaccinated, then we're going to stop paying you. And the American Medical Association supported this. During the oral arguments, the justices were asking the plaintiffs, they were asking them, they said, hey, do you guys have any hospitals? Do you guys have any hospitals that don't want this? Is there any sort of medical group or groups of physicians or medical corporation or whatever that doesn't want this? Do you have it? Especially those who run and operate hospital facilities, any of them. And unfortunately, for the plaintiffs, they didn't have anyone who said in that field that they didn't want it. And so the justices ruled, well, this must be just following the science. Now, here's the thing. Imagine if a group of people who sort of believe that trust in God, using water, sunlight, exercise, diet, temperance, if a group of people who did that, who ran hospitals, said, hey, listen, we have different opinions on whether or not vaccines are good. However, we believe that every single individual has the right. And most importantly, we've had people who've worked at our hospital before there was even a vaccine who were exposed multiple times to this. And many people got it. And some of these people have natural immunity. We ask that you do not mandate this. Allow each hospital to make the decision for what is best in their particular circumstances, and every individual to make the best decision for their particular health needs. They could have said that, but they didn't. They went along with this. They remained silent, and their silence was support of this mandate. So here's the thing. Are we getting a bunch of money from the federal government in the forms of grants and stuff like that? No, not necessarily. We're getting payments, but those payments are 68% of the budgets of some hospitals. I don't know every single hospital, but I can tell you it's not an insignificant amount. And because of that, there's no biting the hand that feeds you. There's no standing up against the mandate. There's no way that was going to happen, unfortunately. And so this is what we got. Let's look at point 6 here. Is the General Conference ignoring the Adventist health message? Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, the Seventh-day Adventist Church has intentionally, pertinently, and globally promoted the Adventist health message, specifically the holistic healthy lifestyle as primary in staying healthy and maintaining an optimally functioning immune system. I just have to stop here. I've been reading our publications, and I hope that someone who's watching this will show me that I'm wrong. But I don't remember them citing the study in our Review and Herald or some of our other popular church organs, saying the study which showed that people who ate a vegetarian diet were 67% less likely to be hospitalized from the virus. I don't remember anyone talk. I remember people talking about it, but I don't remember any official organ. I don't remember anyone saying that, hey, this virus is affecting people with severe comorbidities. And if we can help you lower your blood pressure, if we can help you reverse your diabetes, if we can get you to eat a vegetarian, whole foods, plant-based vegetarian diet, you have a greater likelihood of surviving this, particularly even before the vaccine came out. I don't remember that at all from any official church voice. Don't remember that. All I remember was we need to do what the government says. We don't need to be selfish. We need to wear our masks. We need to stay inside. And when the shot comes out, boy, you better take it because it's selfish if you don't. That's what I remember. If someone can show me that I'm wrong, I'll be happy. I'll be very happy to say that I'm wrong on this one, but I don't remember, and I've been looking for this for some time. I know that independent ministries have been saying that, but not official church organs and church voices. Don't remember that at all. I do know that some would say, well, it's important to eat vegetarian, but make sure you get your vaccine, get 2 of them if you can, maybe 3. That's great. Don't be a conspiracy theorist. Just if your vegetables are good. And then and then some of them, I remember, would go out of their way to talk about how many vegans they had dying in their hospital who had the virus. So that's what I remember. I don't remember, hey, we can build the body up and this is the way to go. I don't remember that. But again, I would like to be proven wrong. The church has at the same time encouraged and supported universal public health measures of disease prevention, such as social, physical distancing, masking as appropriate, hand washing, self-quarantine as needed, and responsible vaccination. The approach has been one of both lifestyle and preventative public health measures, not either or. Listen, I firmly believe that there's a place for medicine. I do. If I'm in an accident or if I have severe injury, there's going to be drugs and surgery that I'm going to need. But I am also concerned that we have actually minimized the effect of the preventative measures, and we've minimized the effect of actually treating this with the things that we have at our disposal. I've been a part of many different discussions, and I have friends in different ministries, whether it be Med Missionary. I've seen Dr. Margaret Song, give a whole presentation on how to use hydrotherapy. I've heard all kinds of wonderful things, but this wasn't a massive push. I know in the beginning, official church voices talked about the 1918 Spanish flu and how some people used hydrotherapy. I do remember that, but I don't remember saying, hey, this is really going to work. We need to do all these things. I do remember some doctors who were very much in support of the vaccine, talking early on about N-acetylcysteine. But beyond that, and I know some others who mentioned vitamin D, but never saying you can really use these things to help yourself and to treat yourself, especially in the early days when they told you don't come into the hospital until your lips turn blue. I don't remember that either. I just remember do what they say, stay home. Hopefully you get a little sunlight. Hopefully you get a little fresh air, stay away from people, wear your mask, and then go to the hospital when you need to and make sure you get your shot. And so this has been the message that we've given. Now, let's trust in health message. But here's the thing. The main question is vaccination a part of our health message? Is it a part of our health message? Well, here's the interesting part. Some people early on in our faith did not think so. And I've covered these in various lectures and videos that are on the internet. And so I'm not going to go over them in detail, but this is just simply a recounting of J.N. Loughborough, one of our early evangelists who actually became a member of the Anti-Vaccination Society in Great Britain. And he actually was against it. He felt that this was awful. And he talks about a story of how they were forcing people on a boat, poor people on a boat, to get the shot. And he talks about the most disgusting and inhumane way they were doing it. And he was spreading their literature, the anti-vaccination literature, all over it. Now, here's a guy who was one of our early evangelists. And one of the things you'll find is that if you were to go through the published writings of Ellen White, you never find her writing a letter to him saying, hey, don't waste your time with that. That's not a part of our health message. So no, that didn't happen. This was a discussion that John Harvey Kellogg had in the General Conference in 1899. And this is the General Conference Bulletin, which records his discussion that he had on vaccination. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but he essentially contrasts getting everyone a shot of smallpox back then with God's method of healing. He believed that the vaccine could indeed prevent disease, but he felt that you were using poison to fight poison. And he goes on to say, this method of fighting disease with disease is the human way of meeting disease, just as we fight fire with fire. But God has given us a truth that isn't the power to lift man above the power of disease. He has given us principles which, if we obey and follow, will change our bodies so that we shall not have to be vaccinated. That will lift the body above the power of disease and above the power of sin. For sin and disease go along together. Disease is the consequence of sin, and sin induces moral disease. So according to his view, based on what his understanding of the smallpox vaccine was, that he felt that the health message was a greater preventative than the vaccine itself. And notice he says that if you live this way, this can lift you above the power of disease. That's what he felt in 1899. Now, he does change his mind later on, but it's important to note while he was still a member of the church, he felt that way. E.J. Wagner also in 1899 felt that even though vaccination and inoculation had some value, he felt that it wasn't in harmony with the scriptures. Listen to what he says. It may be said that vaccination and inoculation have saved many lives. No doubt they have served a purpose and will yet do so among people who find that course easier than keeping themselves thoroughly clean. But to fill one's body with death as a means of warding off death is unscriptural and scientific. That was his view. And again, all these things are included. I've done other videos and we'll reference it, but if you check it out, there's much more than this. This was in 1904. This was Daniel H. Kress, who was a physician who was trained at the University of Michigan, and he was living in Australia at the time, and he was the editor of the Australasian Good Health. And listen to what he says about vaccines. Okay, this is his opinion about the smallpox vaccine, which was widely given in those days. In regard to vaccination, I've always preferred to keep quiet. Personally, I've never been able to see any physiological reason why it should be necessary to inject a deadly poison to protect from any disease. Even if it should protect from that disease, it would prove an injury to the system and invite other diseases. There are other means of protection which are equally effective and less harmful than the vaccine. The principal means of protection is a healthy body. Germs are unable to injure a healthy man. So to build up the general health is the natural means of protection against smallpox. That's what he believed. He believed that the health message was greater than the vaccine. So today, when we're talking about it, we've just ignored all these voices. We've never had a frank discussion about it. And we've said, well, that's the health message. But these guys who were living there when smallpox was killing people, they saw it ravage people and destroy lives. They believe that simple hydrotherapy, diet, sunshine, water, pure air, trusting in God were greater preventatives and didn't have a downside. And again, we recorded so much of that in our book that we wrote on this very subject, which was in response to the 2015 statement. And we go through the Bible, we go through Ellen White's writings, what she didn't say and what others said about her. And then we actually go through Adventist history. And that's where you find where we just shared some of these quotes. They're all in there. And again, this is why we wrote it, so that people would have this and say, well, what really is the health message? Is it really the health message? Yeah, drink your water, eat your vegetables, but make sure you go get your shots. Is that really it? Again, God's people need to get together and really ask ourselves, is this it? Considering all the baggage that is tied to it. Point number 7, does the Seventh-day Adventist Church see the preventative health mandates as a religious liberty issue? If not, why not? Of course they don't. Notice they right away, preventative health mandates. Preventative health mandates. If this product doesn't stop the spread of the disease, if it doesn't stop the spread of disease, then how is this a preventative health mandate? If indeed, then some people argue, well, it reduces hospitalizations and death. But when we actually examine some of these statistics, particularly in Great Britain, what we find is that many people who are dying of the particular virus, when they've actually had 2 doses or 3 doses, sometimes they die, and on their form it says unknown when it goes to their status. It says unknown whether or not they had any doses. And then when people dig in, they go, well, it's clear these people had it. It's clear that people are still dying. It's clear that people are still hospital. 60% of everyone at Israel who was in the hospital at one time had at least 2 doses of this product. 2 doses. So is this really about preventative health? Considering all the baggage that's behind it. Again, that's never being asked. It's never being asked what's happening to people as a result of this. It's just, well, it's just preventative health. Do we not see all the other implications? They go on. The Seventh-day Adventist Church has a long history of defending freedom of conscience, particularly in the cases of religious conviction regarding the observance of the seventh-day Sabbath as taught in the Bible. I like how that's really the one we stand, we shine. Oh yeah, we've defended the Sabbath, and we should defend the Sabbath, right? We should defend it. We should defend people who want to opt out of tests, who want to have ability to not go to work or have some sort of concessions made to help them stay in the workplace. I get that. That's certainly important. But where were we on homeschooling? Where are we on legislation when it comes to the religious freedom of those who are in the womb? I mean, where are we there? And the answer is we're not. We're not there. And so we've sort of narrowly defined religious liberty as kind of a Sabbath issue, and it just isn't. It's much broader than that. If you don't see that, you haven't been studying history. You don't realize the great fight we have. And sadly, as I know some of the people who are behind this statement have studied church history. I know that they've read their Great Controversy. I know they've read a whole host of other books which talk about the great fight. They understand what happened with the Edict of Nantes and how so many of the freedoms in the Edict of Nantes didn't seem to be directly related to religious liberty, but one by one of them, each were taken away until religious liberty was a dead letter in France. So I know that they know this, but we just write it and we talk about what we've done for the Sabbath. Further, the church recognizes from Bible prophecy there will be in the future a decree that will call everyone on the earth to choose between receiving the seal of God or the mark of the beast. That's true. But here's the thing. Wouldn't it be good to be protesting against the apparatus of the beast while it's being set up? Wouldn't it be good to say, hey, this whole thing is not the mark of the beast, right? These mandates, these passports, this is not the mark of the beast, but man, this technology is bad and can be used for bad things. And the social credit system in China is bad, and we don't want that here. Wouldn't it have been nice to say that? Wouldn't it have been nice to say, hey, we're going to stand against that? No. Crickets. Absolute crickets. And notice this, the current COVID protocols are not that decree spoken in Revelation. We agree. But why is it that you are not looking at the bigger picture and you're just ignoring everything? In addition to defending freedom of conscience, the Seventh-day Adventist Church has a long-standing history of supporting responsible vaccination. They do, but they also have a history of not supporting it. They have a history of not supporting mandates. They have a history of believing that the health message was greater than smallpox vaccination. They actually have that history. They have a history of notable physicians in our church who had problems with it. There's an anonymous letter that I talk about in one of our videos that was published maybe around 1962 in the Ellen White estate, where someone had a problem with the polio vaccine. And they actually write about how they felt that our health message and the light that we've been given is different than the mandates for polio. So it's kind of, I don't know. We have to really rethink some things here. Anyways, we go on. Our missionaries have received smallpox, typhoid, diphtheria vaccinations for decades. Seventh-day Adventists have historically supported public health policy and so they go on. They say, for decades, the Seventh-day Adventists have historically supported public health policy and vaccines. Therefore, we do not believe that this is a theological religious liberty issue for the church. I like that, for the church. So what is the church composed of, right? It's composed of members. And if enough members have a problem with it, shouldn't that be your problem too? You see, this is the issue. The church is made up of members, and without members, you don't have a church. All the leadership authority, everything that exists because there are members who are united by a message in Jesus Christ. And if you are taking a segment of them saying your position really doesn't matter, you do not represent the church, you're essentially pushing them out of the church without disfellowshipping them. And that's not good policy. There are many people in the church who are very sincere about this, who have very strong religious beliefs, and there are people who gave up alcohol, smoking, chewing, a lifestyle of drug taking. As a matter of fact, there are people who've changed from eating meat to becoming vegetarian, even vegan, changed it because they were convicted of a health message. There are people who have completely and radically changed their lives to get off drugs and have prevented surgery. Why? Because they believed in a health message. And you just say, well, I know that you kind of believe in this health message, and that's a problem, that you don't want to take these vaccines, but your beliefs are far outside all of this. I know that you gave all this up because you believe this way, and now you don't want to take the vaccine because you believe this way. Well, now you're outside. No, that doesn't work that way. And so they go on. The statement, and we'll pull it up here so you can see it more accurately. It says this: the statement on immunization was released in April 2015, long before the COVID immunization became politicized. Now, I like this because this is a backhanded statement to those who have united and joined and formed a wonderful coalition to sort of make this an issue. The Liberty and Health Alliance has had a number of people sign their petition to ask the conference to change the statement. Dr. Conrad Vine has given a number of sermons on this. I believe he's I believe he's a member of the Liberty and Health Alliance as well. And so what they're saying is that, hey, you guys don't really have a right to say anything, because in 2015 we had this statement and you guys didn't care. You guys didn't care at all. And I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that people, when they read this statement, thought much of it. They didn't see the ramifications. What I can tell you is that God did. And I am glad that my co-author and I were convicted early on to write a response to this. Fortunately for us, it started in 2015, took us about 2 years, and we finished our book in 2017, long before all this happened. And we even sent copies of the book to our secretaries, the directors of religious liberty, to our health ministries leaders, to the president of the General Conference. We sent them to all these people. Now, it was pretty much mostly ignored, which is their prerogative. They don't have to read what we write. But we felt this was an issue, and we pointed out that there was going to be a problem with religious freedom. Namely, because in 2015, California, as a state, had 3 exemptions to vaccines. They had the medical exemption, which they kind of still do, but not really. They had a religious exemption, they had a philosophical exemption. After 2015, in a measles outbreak in Disneyland, the Senator Penn, state senator of California, went on a rampage and decided that they were just going to end it. And so he and his friends from pharma and other places got together, and they said, we're going to do away with this. And they did. They were successful. The governor signed it into law and did away with long-standing vaccine exemptions that they had. And this caused a number of people who I know who lived in California to move away. One such family had a child that was vaccine injured, and they couldn't get an exemption from their doctor, a medical exemption, saying that they shouldn't receive any more vaccines to go to school. And so they left. But the point of the matter is, this was an issue even then. Just because a large body of the church didn't wake up to it, that doesn't mean that they don't have the right to say something. They absolutely have the right. That's kind of like saying to Martin Luther, say, well, Martin, you're coming on pretty late. There was a group of people named the Waldenses. They've been protesting the Catholic Church since 313 AD, and then there was John Huss, and then there were some in the Celtic Church. They're way before you. We've been having this policy of papal supremacy for quite some time, and so you don't have any right to say anything. And that's really not true. The updated document released in 2021 follows our longstanding practice as a church in supporting immunization. As stated earlier, however, this is not to deny that COVID immunizations could be an issue of conscience for individual members with personal convictions, not a religious liberty conviction, no. And thus a religious issue, a religious liberty issue for them, but not for the church. But the 2021 Reaffirmation document recognizes personal choice and offers to provide counsel for those who see this as a religious liberty issue. So you can see it as a religious issue. The church will not see it as a religious issue, which is strange because, again, the church is made up of members. And if enough members see it as a religious liberty issue, shouldn't the church at least discuss this policy? At least allow some people at the table who have a different viewpoint than those who are in the same echo chamber? I would think that would be fair, right? But while we're all here talking about the personal convictions and religious liberty issue, and again, the idea is this is merely preventative health. This is just preventative health. We're just saving lives. We know some people get worked up, but here's the thing. For some people, it's much more than that. This is Maddie Gary. She's the young girl sitting in a wheelchair who has to be fed through a nasal gastric tube. She was paralyzed. She was actually in the trials. This was Senator Ron Johnson had testimony, had these people come in who were injured, and they were enrolled in the trial, so they know exactly what she got. They know how much she got, and so they gave her data. They gave her data to the actual drug company. And so here she is, paralyzed from the basically waist down, has to be fed with a nasal gastric tube as an injury from the shot. No conspiracy theory, testifying before the Senate. This is a big issue for her. And for other people who don't want this to happen to their kids, seeing that this could be a problem, shouldn't this just be more than, it's just personal conviction? It's preventative health. Well, what about this being a preventative health where you don't want your health compromised, particularly if you're not at risk for the virus? What was her risk? What was her risk before this? Look at this guy, professional mountain biker, healthy as a horse. What was his risk? He suffered an attack after he had the product injected in his arm after he got his second dose. He said that he experienced heart palpitations, fluttering, had a severe attack of myocarditis, and now he can never ride his bike the way that he used to. He has to be monitored all the time. What was his risk? His life is completely upended. No big deal. This is all about preventative health. When is it about preventative health when people don't want to be injured, who aren't at risk? I mean, granted, I think even if that's your decision, you should be able to make that decision. If you want to fight it doing something else, you should be able to fight it doing something else. But these people weren't even at risk. They were not in the high risk category, and they had to get it for whatever reason, whether they needed to travel, whether they were going to roll it out for schools. What about preventative health? What about caring for them? What about helping them using the healing hands of Jesus to prevent people from injury? Now, this is from Open VAERS, and we're just going to highlight a couple of things here. Deaths. I want you to notice this. Look at this. It starts off. So the earliest report that I have is from May 2021. So I assume this is from the rollout about March to May, about 5,000 some deaths. Within about a month or so to July 7th, you get about nearly 4,000 more deaths. And now I circle in blue the amount of people who are disabled, because as we saw that Maddie and Kyle, both the people, they are disabled. They're still alive, but they're disabled. One can't walk and one can't ever ride his bike again as a mountain biker. He can't do what he loved as a young man. And so we have to consider the people disabled. So in July 7th, 2021, let's go on. Notice how the number increases. So now we're looking at here, we went from 9,000 to 13,000, 4,000 more deaths. And then notice here, permanent disabilities jumps by 10,000. 10,000 jumps up. That's crazy. These are people who are out of the workforce. Again, we go up here. Now we're in October. We're in October, and now we've jumped another about 3,000, another 3,000 deaths. What is that? That's the two towers on 9/11, give or take some planes. I think that's what the total was, 3,000. And then notice that the permanently injured goes up another 7,000. 7,000 permanently injured from this. Now, again, you can say what you want about the VAERS. You can say, well, it's passive. It doesn't collect everything. It's grossly underreported, and anyone can report. Well, it is grossly underreported. Some estimates that it's 1% of all injuries. Others estimate it's about 6 to 10% of all injuries. And yes, almost anyone can report it, but it is a felony if you put a false report in there. And studies have shown that 67% of all reports made into VAERS are done by medical professionals. So take that with what you will. When we go up now, we're in November. We went from 16, now we're at 18. So another 2,000 more deaths. And then we go up another 6,000 permanently injured, another 6,000 people permanently injured. I mean, again, It just keeps going. And we go on. And now we're in December, and we went up about another 1,000 or so deaths. And I think one of the reasons why this is slowing down is because all those who got the procedure are done getting it. And those who don't want to get it aren't getting it anytime soon. Of course, that may change with the mandates, but that's it. Of the disabled, we have another 2,000 or so added. So we went up from 30,000 to 32,644. 32,000 people permanently disabled, out of the workforce, can't do what they loved, may even have more problems like paralyzed from the waist down, unable to enjoy life the way they were before. What happened to this as a preventative health measure? I just have to ask this, and in all of our talk about the health message and everything, how many people you think die every year from eating carrots, drinking water? I mean, I know that hydrotherapy for some people, if you do extremes too cold, it can hurt you. But how many people you think, are permanently disabled every year from practicing hydrotherapy? How many people do you think are permanently disabled from taking herbs and getting sunlight, maybe taking some vitamin D? Yeah, I know you can take too much vitamin D, but apparently, even when we think we're taking too much, it's still not enough for some people. How many people die every year from these natural things? And yet, which is a part of our preventative health message? Is it this? Is this just something we have to accept with our preventative health message? And this is just how we make people healthy. But apparently, this is how we make 22,000 people dead and almost 40,000 people permanently injured. This is just what we're supposed to do. This is a part of the preventative health message. Again, I think we need to really ask ourselves, is this what God would have us do? Is this really about going along and these are just an issue of personal convictions and personal choice, religious freedom for them individually, but not for the church? Or is it more? Should we not be questioning these things? Again, to point 8, what is the position of the Seventh-day Adventist Church regarding the United States and Bible prophecy? Since our earliest days, the Seventh-day Adventist Church has understood the second beast of Revelation that rises out of the earth with 2 horns like a lamb as the United States and Bible prophecy. Based on the prophetic scenario, we believe that the beast from the sea, the papacy, and the beast from the land, the United States, will unite in a confederacy of evil force to restrict the freedoms of conscience so that no one will be able to buy or sell unless they receive the mark of the beast. Now, I just had to stop right there. Last time I checked, the United States is requiring that everyone get something injected into their body. Is trying to. They recently stopped on the OSHA mandate, but is certainly trying to force people who work in hospitals and healthcare to get something injected in their body, which in some cases may not be very good for them. And I think I distinctly remember the Pope saying that it's important that everyone get the shot too. That's interesting. So the Pope supports it, and the United States supports it. And for some people, you cannot buy or sell or go get something to eat unless you have a passport. But it's just not related. It's not related. I agree that the vaccine mandates and passports are not the mark of the beast. But my goodness, can't you see the railway being laid for the train that's going to drive over it? Can't you see that? And it's not that hard. It's not that hard to see what they've done in Germany and Austria and in Australia, where they have camps where they take people away out of their home and take them to essentially a COVID camp where they have to stay. They have to be forcibly quarantined. And this just isn't an issue. This isn't something we should be talking about. When I've discussed with people who live over in Australia, they tell me it's bad. People who've been teachers, nurses, and doctors, and people who have regular jobs for 30 years are losing their ability to work because they're forced to take something in their body that they don't believe is good for them, that they believe violates their freedom of conscience and their religious freedom. And we're just like, yeah, well, it has nothing to do with that. Can't we see that when building a platform, that the platform or the foundation is not necessarily the thing itself, but is the thing on which it stands? When someone builds a house, you don't look at the concrete slab and you say, well, that's we know what that's going to be. That has nothing to do with the house. No, that has everything to do with the house. The house is then built on that foundation. And I say that this isn't even the foundation. This is just another brick. This is just more siding, more wood, more wiring, whatever it is, but it's building the house that we've been talking about that is going to fulfill prophecy. That's what it is. And why is it that we're not even talking about it is beyond me. And sure, we can talk about the Sabbath being the center of this battle, right? I believe that God's law is going to be at the center of this. Are we going to obey God or are we going to obey man? But that starts even now. It's not just well, let's just hold on, guys. Just wait till the end. Wait till the end. I know it looks bad. I know it sounds like what we've been talking about, but it's not. That's not going to do. Thinking people are not going to see it that way. I did a presentation some time ago in September with Dr. Olatunji, and we discussed how the Sunday law isn't what is happening now, but how everything is happening is leading to that. That there are things in place that are leading to that. And look, there are other people in time that have seen this. They've seen this and they know that these things are bad. In the discussion that I had on the Sunday Law Junior, which you can find on our website, I actually go through and I show how mandates have been used particularly harmful in a harmful manner against Black people. Now, it's funny that the church has issued statements on racism, that Andrews University went on an apology tour, that there's been a number of mea culpas, and I don't understand why they're doing it now. I don't understand. I don't understand all that, but they're doing it. They're doing all these mea culpas and saying they're sorry and all this other stuff, and that, you know, we need to have diversity and inclusion officers, and we need to do all this. That's the way our higher education is. That's the way that our institutions are being run. We're actually becoming very woke in that. But how is it that when we bring up this issue of mandatory vaccine, we don't talk about how it disproportionately affected Black people in history? And this is one of the things that I actually talk about in the Sunday Law Junior. I actually go through a chunk of the history. This is Frederick Douglass. Listen to what he says here. And here's a guy who obviously championed for the rights of slaves. He was a great abolitionist, great writer, great intellect. This is what he says: I am with you in your opposition to compulsory vaccination. My logical faculty was offended at it long ago. At best, it was simply boring one hole to stop another, and now it seems not to even do that. If men die of smallpox after vaccination, you do me justice when you count me on the side of liberty and opposed to every species of arbitrary power. I am for the largest liberty of thought and conduct this side of crime. I am no more in favor of such power when wielded by a majority than when wielded by an individual. That's a letter that he wrote to a physician. Amazing. And again, I went through all of this. I showed how in the medical journals, they talked about how it was important to force vaccines on Black people, and how they actually talked about them as if they were ignorant and rude, and that they needed to do something to force them to have it. And it went through all these journals. They talked about how they would sometimes experiment and forcibly test them to see if they had a certain type of bacteria. In this case, they actually gave someone, they obliterated someone's tonsils in their mouth because they detected a type of bacteria, because after all, poor people, Black people, had no rights, according to them. This is from the Arkansas Medical Society. And again, here they are again, talking about all the ways of trying to control Black people, to force them to take the vaccine, and how they're scared of it, and how they can overcome it, and how they need to force it into them. Again, here's more of it over and over again. This is from 1901 in the St. Louis medical era, talking about again and again how more people need to be vaccinated, how the Black people and those pockets of people who refuse to be vaccinated, this isn't good. We need to clamp down. We need to force them to get the shot. I mean, again, over and over, talking down everything. This was an article. This is an article published in the Review in 1897, which talked about how the authorities of Atlanta, Georgia, were forcing people, and they were forcing them to be vaccinated. They were grabbing them, pulling them out of halls and courtrooms and weddings, and giving them the shot because they didn't have it. This is what they did. This is how it was rolled out with smallpox. This is what they did. And I pointed this out in Sunday Law, that since the beginning, when we've forced this on people, it hasn't looked good. And they did it particularly to Black people because they felt, well, there's no way they can fight back, which is absolutely horrible. This is from the Baltimore Sun. And this is fascinating because they actually talk about preventing Black people from having jobs if they refuse to be vaccinated. Sound familiar? This is what they thought would help everyone by saying, hey, you can't work unless you get the shot. That's what they were doing back in 1897. Again, this was a story of students who were around who would attack, and I say attack, and it's actually descriptive of how they would tackle people, force people to be imprisoned if they wouldn't get a shot. Again, this is in the genetics of these mandates. This is in the genetics of compulsory medicine. This is why it should be checked. This is why it should be stopped. This is why it is a religious freedom issue. If it affects the bodily integrity, it is a religious freedom issue. And again, I did a whole nother series on why it's not the mark of the beast, but how it's setting this all up. This is why we should be paying attention. But notice this. These are some of our own voices who had a problem, They believed in vaccines, but they had a problem with the mandates. This is in 1901. This was published in the Review and Herald. Okay. And this is after 1899, after Great Britain had passed its conscientious objector clause, which allowed people to opt out of smallpox vaccination. And so whoever's editing, the editor of the review, has included this brief news snippets in there. And this is what they say: the magistrates seem to be having a difficult task on hand in trying to decide questions of conscience. Observes an exchange published in London, England. The law allows the conscientious objector to vaccination to receive a certificate of exemption, but it seems that a man's statements to that effect is not sufficient. Now, it's interesting because currently in the military, people have applied for these exemptions and they've been wholeheartedly denied. When people have said, I don't want the shot based on aborted fetal tissue or experiments with aborted fetal cell tissue, people have rejoined and said, well, do you take this product, that product? And because those have been used, or the aborted fetal tissue has been used in the making of this or that, almost as if to say, hey, you live with it anyways, you should just take more of it. And so this type of thing is happening now, where people's consciences have to be examined. And people sometimes even have to write a statement, particularly in the military, on why they don't think they should have it. And someone gets to read it and decides whether or not they should have it. Well, this happened in after 1899. And notice what the editors say: he must prove to the satisfaction of the magistrates that he is conscientious. Of course, the thing is impossible, for in the case of that kind, no one can do more than solemnly declare that his conscientious convictions. The result is that of granting the exemption depends wholly upon what the magistrate believes in the case and not about what the applicant believes. The worst feature about the matter is the precedent that is set that a man's conscience may be subject of legal examination. Notice the comment there. The Inquisition was built on that. Again, these were people who believed, most likely, in the science and the helpfulness of vaccination, but they even saw in the mandates serious problems. This is from Signs of the Times, 1907, and this was taken from a paper, from a California paper, and they took the article and they put it in the Signs of the Times. MC Wilcox, who was the editor, clearly liked what they were saying. And it's interesting because they are very concerned about Sunday legislation. Now, listen to the argument here. Here's in the large box, it says the American people will never submit to compulsory religion. That is something which, with compulsory vaccination and belief in ghosts and fairies, belongs back in medieval times, when the smartest people didn't know any better than to close their eyes and accept any kind of religious doctrine, which those in power saw fit to cram down their silly throats. Now, it's interesting because then it goes on. It says the Constitution of the United States is the supreme law. It says Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or the press. Will the legislature of the state of California presume to do that which the Constitution of the United States says the Congress of the United States shall not do? Now, this is fascinating because the MC Wilcox was worried about compulsory laws or blue laws in the state of California. And notice that the argument made here by someone else that MC Wilcox includes in here is the link between paternalistic religious legislation and compulsory vaccination. When we sit here and we say there's no connection with Revelation 13, no connection, unfortunately for those who say that, there were people in our church who saw that, who were living in times when there was constant talk about compulsory vaccination. It's only been in the front of our faces now, and largely it's been sort of divided up depending on what state you lived in. But now it seems to be national, and so it's been in the forefront of our conversation, and people are making these allusions, and those in the church are like, no, that has nothing to do with it. Well, unfortunately, people disagreed, and these were people who were editors and writers and thinkers and theologians and evangelists in our church. Here's another article. This is also published in the Signs of the Times, 1910. M.C. Wilcox is still the editor. And listen to what he talks about how a group of people got together to have a meeting to create an anti-vaccination society. And of course, anti-vaccination back then simply meant that you were against mandates. It's interesting that we've come full circle because the definition has now been changed to include those who are against the mandates. A lot of people go, well, I'm not anti-vax. Well, apparently now everyone is. If you don't want the mandates, you're anti-vax. Whether you like vaccines, whether you take some, not others, whether it doesn't matter, the definition has changed. And so now everyone who doesn't think that there should be mandates is anti-vax. And there's more things that people say which are very shameful towards them. But anyways, what happens is these guys get together, a medical doctor who is upset about it, has a police officer come and breaks up the meeting, tries to break up the meeting, and then has one of them arrested. And the arrested man was later let go because there was no reason for him to be there. But notice as we get towards the end of the article, it says the arrested man had no redress, yet we believe in proper vaccination. So here it is. M.C. Wilcox believes in proper vaccination. Doesn't have a problem with it, right? He's very clear. But this is a shame. And yet this action lies right along the same lines of religious legislation clamored for before every parliament of the people, state and national. The sad fact is that such things as this of today will be forgotten by the people in the rush of tomorrow, while in the future they will be used as precedents for the promoters of religious and paternal legislation. Again, he's not saying it's the mark of the beast. Neither am I. Neither is anyone else that I know that is credibly criticizing the positions of the church. No one I know. And yet we all see what they were seeing way back then. And somehow it still gets ignored. And I'm not sure why. The January 26 article closes with a pastoral appeal. You can read it on your own. I'm not going to read it here. It's basically about unity and seeing the bigger picture, doing evangelism, those type of things. But I want to make a pastoral appeal too. I'm not a pastor, but I want to make one. I think it's important that when we talk about leadership, we have to understand something, that when you go back to the Old Testament, particularly in the book of Kings, you look at these kings of Judah. I say Judah because many of them, I believe, like even Solomon, did some of the things they did for what they thought was the greater good. Many people think that Solomon just had unbridled lust, and that's why he thought it would just be a great idea to marry over 700 women. And I'm sure that that had something to do with it. But a man as smart as he is understood that marriages were mostly political and that he could secure the health and welfare of his nation by doing something that maybe, well, clearly was wrong according to the Bible, but maybe in his mind, he just thought it wasn't that bad and that the greater good would be to keep the institution going, that, you know, he's built the temple, he's done all this stuff, and that he would do that. And what he did is he laid the framework for the kings to follow. And there were some kings who went further than what well, I shouldn't say further, they went right along lines with what he did, offering sacrifices to idols, but many of them kept the temple. Ahaz closed it, but many of them kept the temple. They would put idols in there. They would want to show, hey, we're a part of being pluralistic. You know, we're friends with everyone. We don't want to be isolationist. We don't want to have some sort of hyper nationalism. We don't want to be, you know, extremists and say our God's the only way. We don't want to do that. We want to show that we can be friends and we can be allies with our nations around us. It's important that we have these partnerships. How else can we reach them? If we put their idols in our temple, they'll come to our temple, then maybe they'll learn something. I believe that many of these people who did this, made these compromises along the way, did so because they thought it was for the greater good. They were going to benefit the church somehow. They're going to benefit God's people. But notice that the writers of Kings and Chronicles are never impressed by the compromising kings. And some of these compromising kings did financially well for the nations. Sometimes it was disastrous and they lost battles and terrible things happened, but sometimes they did okay. But the writers of Kings and Chronicles don't care about that. They didn't care about that. All they cared was about faithfulness. And so when we get to 2 Kings chapter 23, and we're reading about the reforms that Josiah is making and how he gets everyone to read the word of God, and he's talking to them. And then it talks about him taking these, starting in verse 5, it says he put down the idolatrous priests whom the kings of Judah had ordained to burn incense in the high places of the cities of Judah, and the places round about Jerusalem, them that also burned incense unto Baal, to the sun and to the moon and the planets and all the host of heaven. And he talks about how he removes all these guys. In other words, Josiah had to go back down to all these decisions that were made, and he had to examine them. Hey, what are we paying all these guys for? Well, they're there to burn incense to the gods in the high places. Well, why are they doing that? Well, the king so-and-so determined that this would be a good way to show that we're friends with the king of Moab, and this helped trade, and this brought in this deal. And he's like, well, according to the Bible, this has got to end. And then he goes on a little bit further. Verse 7, and he broke down the houses of the Sodomites that were by the house of the Lord, where the women wove hangings for the grove. Now, of course, this is in verse 7 is dealing with male prostitutes who had set up shop around the temple. Think about it, around the temple. And I'm sure someone said, well, why are these guys here? Well, we don't want to judge anyone's sexuality per se. And so we kind of just want to live and let live. And Josiah's like, look, guys, this is just simply wrong. We were not constituted to do this. That's not our goal, to go along to get along. Our goal is to simply be faithful. And so he had to get rid of them, and he had to get rid of the female prostitutes as well. And then he had to destroy idol after idol, some of which were made at great expense. He even had to destroy the chariots of he took away the horses. In verse 11, he took away the horses of the kings of Judah had given to the sun at the entering house of the Lord by the chamber of Nathan Melech, the chamberlain, which was of the suburbs, and burned the chariots of the sun with fire. I'm sure those chariots were costly. I'm sure those chariots were costly. And for whatever benefit they gained by that, Josiah said, it's enough. It all has to be destroyed. He had to go through step by step and cleanse it. And as painful as it was, and how much money was lost, and how many temple advantages they lost, the Bible praises Josiah for doing this. It praises him for making these decisions. We have to get to the point where we are no longer going to care what the world thinks about us. We're not going to care where the money is coming from. We have to make decisions that are in harmony with the scriptures. And if we don't know what that is, we need to go back and we need to study it with fervency and zeal, and we need to have a discussion about it. So far, when it comes to this issue of mandates, we have not. What the people are looking for is not to undermine the authority of those in power. We're wanting to empower you to make the tough decisions to put us in the right place so that we can all go home, so that we can wrap this up, so we can further the evangelism. No one here on the side of religious freedom, religious and medical freedom, is wanting to become the conference president or to overthrow the leadership. That's not what anyone is interested in. What we're interested in is empowering you to make the hard but right decisions to support your church at such a time when so many things are being off balance. Why? Because we want to have the latter rain. Why? Because we want more evangelism. Why? Because we want the three angels' message to be heard around the world. But as long as we're divided on some of these very key things, it will never happen. And that's perhaps why we experience the shaking, which leads me to the end of my appeal. If we fail to do what Hezekiah did, and even though Josiah did it, but it was too late, if we fail to do that, reform and revive according to the Bible, to examine everything that we've been doing, no matter how long standing it is, and ask if it's in harmony with the Bible, and if it isn't, get rid of it. If we're not willing to do that, then the Lord is going to do reform and revival his way. Even though Josiah did what he did, it was too late. It was too little, too late, and God brought another reformer, and his name was Nebuchadnezzar, and he was a lot less gentle than Josiah. I believe that we will be facing our own Nebuchadnezzar, And it's not maybe one person, it may be a policy, it may be a series of things. I don't know. But the Lord will see fit that his people will be shaken, will be purified, so that the work can go forward. And I just pray that we listen to these solemn warnings, that we make decisions now that are going to be in favor of the church. Remember, the church is made of people, it's made of individuals. And if the individuals are considering this a religious freedom issue, maybe we should back up a little bit, rethink our strategy, and examine this issue properly, listening especially to those voices of dissent that have actually done their homework versus just saying, hey, this is just what we've been doing. This has been our policy. Let us go in it. There are many kings of Judah who continue to do that. And they failed to do the thing that they were supposed to do, and that was reform. And by the time Josiah did it, it was too late. I pray that it's not too late. I pray that we get on the side of reform, that we get on our knees, we humbly and sincerely unite our hearts with God in repentance and fervent prayer so that we can be ready for what is soon to take place. With that, God bless. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you soon.